The envelope was already on the table when I walked in. No greeting. No eye contact. Just a plain white rectangle. My name typed with such sterile precision, it felt like someone had proofread it 5 times. I didn't sit down right away. I stood there for a moment, waiting for anything. A nod. A word. A look. Nothing came. Robert didn't glance up. He just said, effective immediately. Your title has been changed to Strategic Liaison. Compensation adjusted accordingly. That was it. No acknowledgement of what I had just accomplished. No thank you. No explanation. Just a new title I had never heard of, and a 55% pay cut. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because a colder, sharper truth had already settled in the back of my mind. My name is Natalie. I'm 36 years old. And less than 5 minutes before that moment, I was the Senior Director of Aerospace Contracts at Holston Aerodyne. Just last week, I finalized the largest deal in the company's history. $125 billion for 5 long-range aircraft from a European conglomerate, 8 months of international negotiations, back-channel calls, red-eye flights, translation rewrites, and cross-border compliance battles. I managed every detail. I protected every clause. I handled every risk. Alone. I should have been celebrated. Instead, I stood in silence while the man I reported to for over a decade handed me a demotion in a white envelope like a routine memo. 20 minutes earlier, I had been outside that same room, preparing notes for the post-deal transition. I had no idea the meeting I was walking into wasn't a briefing. It was an erasure. The door had opened just a few minutes before I was called in. Lena walked out first. Young. Bright-eyed. Barely 30. And bouncing on her heels like she had just been named CEO. Behind her, Robert laughed. Casual and synchronized with her rhythm, in a way I had never seen with anyone else in that building. They shook hands. Confident. Comfortable. They didn't see me standing down the hall, still holding a file of implementation notes I had written at 2 a.m. I had trained Lena during her internship. She was curious, ambitious, and painfully green. She had potential. But potential doesn't close billion-dollar deals. Potential doesn't know how to decode legal subtext in 3 languages. And potential didn't bleed for this company the way I did. Now, the position I had built from nothing no longer belonged to me. They didn't just replace me. They removed me. Quietly. Cleanly. Efficiently. As if the work, the hours, the sacrifices had always belonged to someone else. I picked up the envelope and folded it in half before placing it in my bag. I didn't say a word. Not then, because that wasn't the moment to fight back. That was the moment to watch, to remember, and to feel everything they hoped I would swallow. They thought I was finished. But the ink hadn't even dried, and they had no idea what I had left behind in the contract. The nameplate was gone. Not replaced. Not misspelled. Just gone, where it used to read Natalie Gray. Senior Director. The frosted glass outside my office now stood bare. Like the door had never belonged to anyone. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to knock or mourn. That room, my room, no longer knew my name. An intern passed behind me, juggling 2 cardboard trays of coffee. She slowed, took a second glance, and asked with a gentle smile. I need help finding something. I returned a tight smile. No. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Then I turned. Gripping the handles of the box, Human Resources had kindly labeled Natalie's personal effects. I carried it down 5 floors. Past departments I hadn't visited since my junior associate days. That's where they put me. Not in an office. Not even a team room. Just a cubicle. Windowless. Phoneless. One of those carpet-walled boxes with a flickering fluorescent light, and a chair that creaked when you sat down. There was a post-it stuck to the monitor that read, Natalie. I'll set you up by end of day. No nameplate. No welcome. Just the lemon-scented scent of commercial disinfectant and a drawer that still held someone else's tangled phone cord. I didn't unpack the box. I just sat there for a while. Not quite breathing. On the wall across from me hung the freshly printed company.org chart. Laminated. Centered. I walked over slowly. Almost cautiously. Half hoping to find some piece of me still there. I wasn't. Not at the top. Not in the footnotes. Not even under project contributors. But Lena was. Lena Maxwell. Director of Global Strategy Initiatives. Her photo beamed beneath the heading, a bold new vision for Holston's global future. A line I had written myself 6 weeks ago. Before I knew who it would be used to describe. The ache in my chest wasn't anger. It was grief. Grief for the version of me who believed that excellence was enough. That loyalty was currency. That building something from scratch gave you roots, but roots don't matter when someone's ready to pave over you. That afternoon, someone from marketing dropped off a stack of folders for the leadership presentation the next morning. These are for Lena, she said, smiling. Arms full. Can you make sure she gets them? I nodded. Numb. And took the stack. One of the folders slipped open slightly as she walked away. Inside was a printout of the original slide deck. Contract finalization Munich team. Lead Natalie Gray. My photo was still there in the draft. Taken the day we signed. Champagne glass still in my hand. But someone had drawn a thick red X over my face. The final version was already updated with Lena's name and headshot. I sat back down and opened the cabinet under my desk. Inside were binders I had built from scratch. Color-coded. Sectioned by negotiation phase. Risk review. Legal summary. Every tab I had labeled with care. Except now. Each one had been covered with fresh labels. LM. Scrawled in pen over my original initials. As if the ink I used didn't matter. As if I never touched a single word. What hurt wasn't the loss of the office or the credit. It was how easy it had been. How quickly they stripped away 15 years like they were erasing pencil from a whiteboard. And the part that cut the deepest was realizing they hadn't just replaced me. They had rewritten the story so I was never there. I didn't sleep for 8 months. Not real sleep. Anyway, just the kind where your body shuts down out of necessity. Not rest. I counted it once. From the first client email at 3:20 in the morning to the final video call that ended just past midnight in Munich, I was the only one holding the deal together. No one else knew how close it came to falling apart. But I did. Because I was the one catching everything before it hit the floor. There were nights I reviewed engine specs on the carpet of a hotel room in Frankfurt. Eyes burning from jet lag and recycled air. Mornings, I took calls from Zurich while still wearing a hospital gown. After collapsing from sheer dehydration, I spent more time in international terminals than in my own apartment. My suitcase never made it back to the closet. I stopped setting alarms because my body ran on panic alone. And still, I stayed. Not because I had to. 3 months before the signing, Avenex reached out. Holston's biggest competitor. They wanted me to lead their global strategy team. They offered a higher salary. Full stock options. And relocation support. I declined. I'm loyal, I said. I walked back into my office that day and closed the door behind me. Opened the Munich file and kept working. I didn't even pause to consider what it meant that I had turned down a future for a company that would soon decide I didn't belong in its past. There was one moment that still sits with me more than the others. One night. One call. 2 days before Christmas. I was in an airport cafe somewhere between connecting flights. I can't remember which city. It doesn't matter. My mother's FaceTime call lit up the screen. I watched it ring out until it stopped. She didn't call again. We had a tradition. She and I. Christmas Eve dinner. 17 years in a row. roast chicken, cranberry sauce from scratch, and a holiday movie we always pretended not to cry over. That year, I missed it. She said she understood, but I still remember the way her voice caught on the phone the next morning. I know she didn't want me to hear it, but I did. I told myself it would be worth it, that if I delivered something big enough, loud enough, valuable enough, then maybe I wouldn't have to explain why I'd disappeared. Maybe they'd see it. Maybe someone would look at the result and understand the price. But no one did. No one asked. No one said thank you. Not when the contract was signed. Not when the press release went out. Not when the client toasted my name in Munich. Instead, I sat alone in a cubicle beneath a flickering light, staring at folders that used to hold my signature, now rewritten in someone else's hand. It's easy to forget the person who carried the weight when you never bothered to notice they were holding it. That's what I kept thinking. Over and over. They didn't forget what I did. They never cared enough to remember. It happened in Paris. Near the end of the negotiation cycle, we were running on fumes. Months of back and forth. Redrafts. Jurisdictional edits. Procurement issues. Language gaps. Everyone was tired. Tense. And one misstep away from pulling the whole thing apart. That Friday night, the CEO of the client company sent me a message. Just us. No agenda. 7:30. Schumannstrasse. A quiet restaurant near the Opera House. Wood-paneled walls. Heavy velvet curtains. Not the kind of place where contracts get discussed. But I knew it wasn't about paperwork. Not officially. He was already seated when I arrived. No assistants. No translators. Just a glass of red wine and a folded napkin. I didn't take out my phone. I didn't reach for my notes. I just listened. He told me about their last deal, a multi-billion-dollar contract that collapsed halfway through implementation because the lead negotiator was abruptly pulled off the project. No explanation. The replacement had no context. No connection. No trust. It set their operations back 3 years. Cost them more than money. Then he looked me in the eye and said, plainly, "We're not signing with Holston. We're signing with you. If you vanish, the deal vanishes too." He didn't say it with drama or demand. Just certainty, like it was the most obvious truth in the room. That moment landed harder than any performance review or bonus I'd ever received. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't corporate praise. It was trust. Pure. Human trust. I nodded and told him I'd see it through. Start to finish. I meant it. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I took out the latest draft of the agreement. I didn't call legal. I didn't ask permission. I opened the master contract file and typed a single paragraph, tucked deep in the implementation section. In clear, simply language. Operational oversight shall remain under Natalie Gray. In the event of reassignment, client may void this agreement. Clause 47B. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't cloaked in jargon. It was just overlooked. Because no one at Holston thought I was important enough to protect. They thought the deal would hold. No matter who delivered it. Because they still believed people were interchangeable. They were wrong. Robert didn't read it. Neither did Lena. They skimmed the executive summary, ran it through legal, and moved on to the press brief. Too arrogant to read the fine lines. Too certain the foundation couldn't crack. But it could. And I had placed the fault line myself. I didn't add the clause out of spite. I added it because someone had looked me in the eye and said, "We trust you," and I knew, without a doubt, that trust wouldn't extend to anyone else. That line, 12 words long, would become the hinge everything turned on. And none of them saw it coming. I showed up the next morning at 8 o'clock sharp. No one expected me to. After what they'd done, after the title change, The pay cut. The silence. They probably assumed I'd vanish. Storm out. Leave in some dramatic arc. That's how most people go when they're humiliated. But I wasn't most people. I wore a clean blazer. Hair pulled back. Eyes steady. I took the elevator down 5 floors and walked back to the cubicle with no nameplate. It still smelled like toner and lemon wipes. Still had that flickering light that buzzed just enough to remind you it existed. Lena passed by once that morning. She didn't stop. Just gave me a glance. Half smile. Half curious. As if she wasn't sure whether to acknowledge me or pretend I wasn't there. I gave her nothing. No smile. No anger. No expression. Robert didn't speak to me at all. His door remained half closed. A sliver of his reflection visible in the glass. I saw him glance in my direction once. Then look away. Quickly. I didn't chase anyone. I didn't demand answers or apologies. I turned to my screen and began typing. Not exit letters. Not applications. Notes. Blueprints. I started rebuilding. But this time, from the outside in, I sent emails. Soft ones. Strategic ones. Messages to engineers I'd once traveled with across time zones. To procurement leads who still owed me favors. To 2 former Holston executives now leading quiet teams at other firms. I didn't ask for jobs. I asked questions. If someone with aerospace compliance expertise were available in Q3, would that be of interest? How's morale on your international team these days? Are you still running post-deal integration out of Lisbon? Each message was a feeler. Not seeds. Just soil checks. I needed to know where trust still lived. That Thursday. During a quiet lunch break. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Washington, D.C. Area code. I stepped into the stairwell and answered. Natalie Gray, yes. This is Allison Kerr. I'm an independent contract law attorney. I've just reviewed the Holston-Urava agreement. I believe you authored Clause 47B. I did. There was a pause. Then she said. Plainly. It's airtight, simple, direct, enforceable in any international court. I exhaled. Slowly. Something settled in my chest. Not pride. Not relief. Just clarity. They have no idea what you gave them. She added. That clause is the smartest part of the entire agreement. And they walked right past it. I thanked her. Hung up. And returned to my desk. I didn't say anything to anyone. I didn't send a single warning. I didn't print a memo. Because real power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't plead to be noticed. It waits. Silently. Patiently. Until it's needed. And I knew that moment was coming. Lena boarded the flight to France with all the confidence of someone who thought the path was clear. She strutted through the executive terminal like the seat was already hers. The first-class boarding pass in her hand felt like a victory lap. What she didn't know, and no one at Holston seemed to understand, was that the contract was not hers to manage anymore. By mid-morning, Urava's legal department sent a terse, unambiguous email to Holston's executive team. Legal counsel. And the board. It read per Clause 47B. This contract is contingent upon post-deal transition being led by Miss Bergrading 000. Natalie Gray. Substitution is not permitted. No further meetings will be held with any other representatives. The message hit the Holston headquarters like a brick through glass. Panic spread quickly. Robert's office door stayed shut all day. He didn't return calls or emails. Behind closed doors, the executive team scrambled. Lawyers argued over wording. And the PR team drafted 3 versions of press releases. None ever saw the light of day. The blame game started. Robert pointed fingers at legal for letting the clause slip through. Legal pushed back, saying the client was overreacting and would be willing to renegotiate. Some tried to say Natalie was too involved. too visible, that it was her fault. The situation spun out of control. But then, in a closed-door meeting, a senior board member broke the silence. Catherine Lennox. Sharp, strategic, and known for cutting through bullshit without raising her voice. She said slowly, "Let's stop pretending this was a clerical error." I recall a private conversation weeks before signing where Robert explicitly said Natalie was making leadership look weak, and her visibility needed to be scaled back. The room fell silent. No one denied it. They had sidelined me deliberately. And now, they were paying the price. What the executives didn't realize was that I hadn't disappeared. I had been there the whole time, holding every loose thread together. The clause I wrote in plain language was a fault line they couldn't see until it cracked wide open. I wasn't fighting dirty. I didn't have to. I just wrote better. The phone rang one afternoon. A number I didn't recognize. Washington, D.C. ARIA code. I almost didn't answer. I was tired of calls I didn't want. Emails I didn't open. Meetings I didn't attend. But something told me to pick up. Natalie Gray, a calm voice, asked. "Yes. This is Jonah Patel from Avanex. We spoke a few months ago." I believe the timing wasn't quite right then. I said nothing, letting the words hang in the air. "I'd like to revisit our offer, with a few upgrades," he continued. I listened. Double the base salary, equity stake, relocation flexibility, a dedicated floor in their new Washington office. Everything I had turned down before, now waiting with my name on it. Then he added something that made me pause. "This wasn't just our idea," he said quietly. "We were encouraged to reach back out by someone who called you a non-negotiable asset. The deal fell apart because you weren't in it. And they don't want the next one unless you are." I asked who. There was a pause. Male Behringer, CEO of the client company. I leaned back in the creaky chair of my cubicle. The scuffed corner of the wall stared back at me like an old scar. I thought about everything I had been through. The erasure. The silence. The blindsided demotion. And now, here was the very person who had trusted me from the start, insisting I was indispensable. Jonah waited for my response. I said carefully, "I appreciate the offer. But before we talk numbers again, I have one condition. Anything. I choose my team. I approve every hire under my division, especially for post-deal integration. No exceptions." Another pause. Then, "Done." I added one more thing. I opened the drawer beneath my desk and pulled out a manila folder I had kept sealed since that night in Munich. Inside was the handwritten note from Male Behringer, the one tucked under my hotel room door. I reread it silently, heart steady. "This time," I said, "I don't just want to oversee deals. I want full life cycle authority, from negotiation to implementation to renewal." "No problem," Jonah answered without hesitation. By the end of the call, I hadn't said yes, but I hadn't said no either. I hung up, placed the phone face down on my desk, and stared out the window at the Washington skyline. The same glass towers that had tried to trap me now felt like a backdrop to what I was about to build. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. About what happens when you don't just survive being erased. You become the name they can't move forward without. And this time, I wasn't waiting for permission. I was the one making the call. The contract sat on the table in front of me, leather-bound and heavy with promise. $1.125 billion. The same jets. The same client. A new beginning. But this time, my name was not just on the signature line. It was woven into every clause, every obligation, every milestone. Signing that deal was more than business. It was reclamation. Quiet. Deliberate. Unshakable. Weeks later, I found myself back in a boardroom. This time at Avanex headquarters. Sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The deal I was about to lead was even bigger. $3.1 billion. A global supply and service agreement that would reshape the industry, and once again. The contract demanded one thing. All operations must remain under my direct oversight. With no exceptions. Holston was collapsing. Rumors swirled through the corridors of their headquarters. 200 layoffs. The CEO's resignation. And Lena, she stopped showing up in leadership calls. The silence was deafening. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message I never expected. From Lena. Can we talk? I think I made a mistake. I stared at the screen. The words hanging there like a ghost. For a moment, I considered replying, but I knew some conversations aren't meant to be had. Some mistakes don't need to be acknowledged. I locked the screen and slid the phone into my bag. Because I had moved past needing closure. My name is now engraved on the marble wall of Avanex's headquarters. It's not just a nameplate. It's a statement. Irreplaceable. Unstoppable. The one they built their future around. I don't feel triumph. Not exactly. It's more like release. The weight of years of erasure lifting off my shoulders. The silence they tried to impose was never weakness. It was strategy. They gambled on me fading away quietly. Instead, I became the name they can't move forward without. I'm no longer proving myself to anyone. I'm not fighting battles in the shadows. I'm leading from the front. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, remember this. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful comeback is the one you write in silence. Signing every page with your worth. And that is my legacy.